One of the things we do a lot at Life Academy is we read biographies. We read the stories of people and we try to learn where they came from and how their lives turned out. Well, today I got this in the mail. My story, Professor John Lennox. Professor John Lennox is a blessing on many levels. I've had an opportunity to meet him 3 times. One of the times was at his office at Oxford University in England, and the other time was at Cambridge, and then I also met him here in the US. Professor Lennox is an inspiration, and he is very good friends with some of my mentors. And so, by God's grace, my goal again is to, whenever I'm in Cambridge or Oxford, I try to go visit when I can, and when he's available and when he's giving talks and so on. Let me tell you the story about the Oxford time we met. Sometimes in life you have to just keep moving forward. Now, I met Professor Lennox in 2010 in Alabama. And he was doing an apologetics conference and training there. That was actually when he was writing his book, 7 Days That Divide. That was the season. I met him. I met his niece, Kristen Getty. You might know Keith and Kristen Getty in Christ Alone, that song. And they wrote it with Stewart Townsend. So I met them in 2010. And then in 2020, between 2010 and 2020, his secretary and I had been communicating. Just once in a while, I send updates. And a lot of my work in philosophy of science is in the question of science and faith, which is a lot of what Professor Lennox has written about. He's written the book, Has Science Buried God? Can Science Explain Everything? So we've done work in a lot of those things. Like I've studied things in that domain. And so I wrote to his secretary, and I'm grateful that we're able to communicate. And in 2020, I had a layover in England, quite a long layover. And we were going to see if we could meet, if I could meet with the secretary and Professor Lennox during this time. And but I hadn't heard back, and it was potentially not going to work out. But guess what? I still bought the bus ticket to go to Oxford. And I said, you know what? Worst case scenario, I can still just walk around. And when I bought the bus ticket and I said I could just walk around, I got an email from the secretary, and he said to me, Amos, Professor Lennox is actually available. His schedule is available for a few minutes. If you can get here by such and such a time, he'll be happy to say, meet, and you guys might be able to connect that day and so on. But here's the thing. I was already on the bus. I was already on the way to Oxford. Isn't that interesting in life? There are times in life where we just have to take the step. We have to take the step. And that taught me a lesson. Now, I'm not saying we should always buy bus tickets to places that we don't have invitations or people that we need to meet, but it taught me something. And these are some of the skills that our students need to learn. Taking initiative matters. It matters a lot more in the AI revolution. So, students, we're going to be reading my story this fall into the spring. So get your copy and let's dive in. Thank you to Dr. John Lennox and his team for giving us a resource that can help us understand his story. And I hope and his story ultimately points to a greater story. And that's Jesus Christ and what he has done for us. So I look forward to reading Professor Lennox's story, and I'll talk to you guys soon. We're also reading his book 2084, which has to do with artificial intelligence and the future of humanity. And then he has another book about Abraham called Friend of God. So if you look at the end of this book, you can see that there's Friend of God, Against the Flow, Cosmic Chemistry, God, AI, and the End of History. And then, of course, I talked about 2084. So great resources. Let's dive in. Have a blessed day.